Arise, as Jinwoo Sung from Solo Leveling in D&D. I gotta give a full-blown warning as there will be some spoilers in this build, but I will save all the spoilers for the second portion of this video, and I will timestamp it down below, because I got pretty obsessed with this series and I read the entire webcomic, or manhwa, and so I know all of his abilities and crazy stuff that he can do. We're gonna try and get as close as we can with this build, but he is an anime protagonist, so he's going to be a little more overpowered than we can do in even D&D. But let's not waste any more time and dive in with the race. We're going to choose Variant Human. This allows us to choose a skill right away, so we're going to choose Stealth. Jinwoo does have some very distinctive stealth abilities. We're going to be able to amp those up a little later, but also with being a Variant Human, you get a feat right away. And unfortunately, we're going to have to save that feat for the spoiler section of this build. Then when it comes to a background in the world of solo leveling, you're diving into these crazy dimensional spaces that are essentially like dungeon diving, and a way that we can amp up the overall power of the character while at the same time living true to this to some extent. We're going to grab the background from Spelljammer, Wild Spacer. This gives us skill proficiencies in athletics and survival, while at the same time granting us the feat Tough, meaning that we get an extra 2 hit points of health per level of this overall build, which is going to go a long way to increasing our survivability. Then when it comes to the stats in the webcomic and the anime, he puts a lot of points into strength, but unfortunately in D&D, you're a little more limited and not gaining a bunch of stat points every single level like you do in solo leveling. But the main character is fairly intelligent and wise, so we need a fairly decent spread. So we're going to wind up with something like this. Then we get 2 additional points from being a Variant Human, which we're going to boost up our Dexterity and Constitution, rounding out those 2 scores. We have a decent amount of points in Charisma, but we're also going to boost that up with the feat that we take, so you're just going to have to trust me that it boosts our Charisma by 1 point. Then when it comes to a starting class, Sungjin Woo, which by the way, I'm going to wind up mixing up his name back and forth, because in the anime, they refer to him by Jinwoo most of the time, and refer to his last name afterwards, like most people do in America. But I read the webcomic, and in the webcomic they follow a little more true to what happens in Korea, where you say the last name first. So sorry if I mixed that up. So as far as the starting class, I was very tempted to go with a rogue, because in the anime and the webcomic he is very good with a dagger, and he gets progressively much better. But that being said, right at the beginning of the series, he goes through a very torturous event that somehow grants him a ton of power, as if he's making a deal with a very creepy entity, especially if you're thinking of that very smiley statue thing that basically just eviscerates him in the most brutal way possible, and I absolutely loved it. But then he miraculously comes back, and that feels like making a deal with that big smiley creep. So as far as a starting class, we're going to go with a Warlock. When you become a Warlock, you get access to simple weapons, which will include a dagger. You can also use light armor, you get saving throws in Wisdom and Charisma, and you get to choose 2 skills. We'll grab Arcana and Intimidation. Both of those skills play into the series much more later on. And without diving into spoilers, I was very tempted to go with the Undead as far as the patron, mostly because of a high level ability that Undead Warlocks get. And that ability wouldn't kick in until basically the very end of the solo leveling series, so I don't find it quite as useful. Plus, we're thinking early on in the series right now, and you're really good with a dagger, and those abilities scale up pretty significantly. So we're going to go with a Hexblade. Becoming a Hexblade gives you a few extra spells to choose from, which we'll dive into in just a second. You gain Hex Warrior, so now you have proficiency with shields and medium armor, and on top of that, now when you make weapon attacks with a weapon that would not require 2 hands, such as a dagger, you can use your Charisma modifier for all of the attack and damage rolls. So now we only have 1 main stat to worry about, and since we have proficiency with medium armor, we only need that 14 in dexterity that we have, because most medium armor will cap out at a benefit of a +2. And for those that might be saying that Jinwoo Sung doesn't actually wear armor, well, in the series he does. He actually acquires a ton of very impressive gear, but when he wears it, he can actually make it so it's not visible. So benefiting from medium armor is actually going to be pretty good. Then we have a great combo from one of the very first abilities that this character gets. In the anime, it's referred to as Murderous Intent, but in the webcomic, it's actually referred to as Bloodlust. It decreases an enemy's stats by 50% and makes it so you can attack them a bit better. So we're going to focus on this ability in two ways. First is the other feature that you get from being a Hexblade, called Hexblade's Curse. This makes it so you gain bonus damage whenever you deal damage to an enemy. This makes it so you can use your bonus action to curse an enemy. Then you actually deal bonus damage whenever you deal damage to that enemy. The bonus damage is going to be equal to your proficiency bonus, and then on top of that, whenever you're attacking this cursed target, you can actually do a critical strike on a 19 or a 20, whereas most people are just going to be waiting for that nat 20. Then if the cursed target dies, you regain hit points equal to your charisma modifier plus your warlock level. And this also ties into the series because a lot of times when the main character levels up, he actually gets to regenerate all of his health. You can use this feature once per short or long rest, but to amp up the idea that you're reducing the stats of your enemy, we're also going to grab the spell Hex. Hex allows you to deal an extra 1d6 of necrotic damage whenever you're dealing damage to an enemy, and you get to choose one ability of that enemy, and they will automatically be forced to roll at disadvantage whenever they're rolling an ability check related to that ability. But now that we mentioned one spell, let's dive into some of the others. We are going to be focusing mostly on using a dagger, so we're just going to grab Booming Blade when it comes to a cantrip, although we can't help but also grab Eldritch Blast because it is a tried and true staple of being a warlock, and as you level up, your cantrips do level up with you. And later on, again, without going too much into spoilers, Jinwoo is able to summon a bunch of daggers simultaneously and send them at his enemies. So we're kind of going to be able to replicate that with our Eldritch Blast, because as you level up, you actually get more blasts to send out simultaneously. So you can think of that as each one of the blasts being a dagger. I'll add other cantrips and spells on the character sheet over on Patreon, but I'll make sure to highlight most of the important ones as we go along. Like one of the other ones you're going to want to grab that you get thanks to being a Hexblade is Wrathful Smite, boosting up the damage you can do with the dagger. And you're going to need some help with that because daggers only do a d4 by default. Then at second level of Warlock, you get some Eldritch Invocations. And while we can grab some invocations now, it's probably better that I just wait until we hit third level to tell you what they are. Because at third level, you get access to second level spell slots and you get to choose a Pact boon. We've already established you're pretty good with a dagger, so we're going to grab the Pact of the Blade. Now your dagger is automatically magical, you can't lose track of it, and you get access to more Eldritch Invocations because of it. So we're going to grab the Eldritch Invocation Improved Pact Weapon. This is going to boost the overall abilities with our Pact Weapon by a +1. I know that's not a huge amount considering you're only dealing a d4 of damage with a dagger, but every little bit counts. And then the other Eldritch Invocation I was tempted to grab before was Armor of Shadows for reasons, but since that just gives you access to cast mage armor at will, it doesn't really help us that much since we already established you're going to be using medium armor. So instead, I'm going to grab Devil's Sight. This allows you to see in darkness, both magical and not magical. And because of this, we're going to grab the spell Darkness. This is a great combo, especially for warlocks, because now you can cast Darkness, possibly focused on yourself. Now, everybody's basically blinded, except for you, because you have access to that Devil's Sight, meaning that whenever you attack anybody in that darkness, it's going to be at advantage. And that was the other reason I waited until just now to establish that one, because you don't get access to the Darkness spell until third level. Then at fourth level of Warlock, you get an ability score improvement. So let's just go ahead and boost up our charisma because that helps everything Warlock related. Then at fifth level of Warlock, you get access to another Eldritch Invocation. So we're actually going to swap out our improved Pact Weapon while at the same time grabbing an additional invocation. So the one that we're going to swap for is Thirsting Blade. This makes it so when you attack with your Pact Weapon, you can now do it twice as part of your attack action. The other invocation we're going to grab is Eldritch Smite. One of the abilities that Sung Jinwoo has is Mutilation. This allows Jinwoo to target vital areas of his enemies. And between Hexblade's Curse improving your crit range by 1 and Eldritch Smite, which allows you to smite your enemies for up to 6d8 damage, if you use these in conjunction, it's very spot on for Mutilate. Because if you crit, you can now double those amount of dice for a total of 12d8, not to mention the extra 2d4 from the dagger itself. Also at this level, you get access to third level spells. But now we're about to hit spoiler territory. So I've given you your warning. If you don't want to know any abilities that Sung Jinwoo is getting in the very near future, I'm afraid you're gonna just have to tune out. But in the webcomic / manhwa, you don't just become anybody that can use a dagger very well. You can become the Monarch of Shadow. And this is basically a super powered necromancer because you're stealing the souls of those that have been defeated, and you can use them as shadows to help fight alongside you. Very specifically, they are shadows and not like zombies or anything, because there's other people that can use zombies in the solo leveling world, most notably another monarch, but that's beside the point. So we need to focus specifically on more shadow-based creatures. We might have a few random undead zombies sneak in there here and there, but I'm going to be focusing more on the idea of like a shadow spirit thing that you can then use to help you fight. So the 3rd level spell I'm going to grab is Summon Shadow Spawn. This allows you to summon a shadow into existence and help fight alongside you. They're actually pretty powerful if you use them right. They can hide in shadows, very accurate to the manhwa, and they get multi-attack and can inflict fear. They're overall pretty good. And because you're the Monarch of Shadow, it's time to tell you what that feat was that I grabbed. It's called Shadow Touch. Shadow Touch allows you to increase one stat, and we already mentioned you got that in Charisma, so you don't have to worry about adding that now. It gives you access to the invisibility spell, which is actually pretty accurate for the character, as you can cast it once without expending a spell slot, and you get one more spell from the Necromancy or Illusion School of Magic that you can cast without expending a spell slot, but it can only be a 1st level spell, so we're going to grab Inflict Wounds. Then, as far as some of the other stuff, now that we're officially the Monarch of Shadow, this idea is driven home even further with the 6th level Hexblade feature, Accursed Spectre. So when you slay a creature, you can bind their soul into your service. You get a specter to fight alongside you. You can verbally command that specter, and it gains a bonus to its attack rolls equal to your charisma modifier. But we don't want to stop just there. We're actually going to do a multi-class. But before we do, because you leveled up, you can swap out one more invocation. And because of the multi-class we're about to do, it's kind of pointless to hang on to Devil's Sight. And it's also pointless to hang on to the Darkness spell. So we're not going to worry about having Darkness on our spell list anymore. I'll make sure to include a different one over on the character sheet, but the invocation we're going to grab instead is Sign of Ill Omen. Sign of Ill Omen allows you to cast Bestow Curse using one Warlock spell slot, but you can only do so once per long rest. And Bestow Curse is a direct upgrade for Hex, so we're also going to wind up getting rid of that spell from our spell list, because Bestow Curse will increase your damage just like Hex did, but instead of with a d6, now it's a d8. The cursed target from this spell has disadvantage on all of its attacks against you. While it's cursed, it has to make a Wisdom saving throw at the beginning of every one of its turns, otherwise it just completely wastes its action, which is an insanely powerful part of this spell. And what's even more notable is when you're upcasting this, because when you upcast Bestow Curse, it just increases the time in which it's active, because it's generally a concentration spell. It only lasts 1 minute, but Warlocks, when they get to a certain level, which we will, they get access to 5th level spell slots. And if you use a 5th level spell slot to cast Bestow Curse, its duration becomes 8 hours instead. And most notably, when you cast Bestow Curse using a spell slot of 5th level or higher, you no longer have to concentrate on it, which is an insanely powerful ability. Because Hex, you had to concentrate, but Bestow Curse, not anymore. So that means you can now have a different concentration spell active in place of it. And just to make sure we don't forget about the core Bloodlust ability and reducing stats, it also grants the ability to force an enemy to have disadvantage on a particular ability. So overall, it just covers all of our bases, and I've never realized how powerful this spell was until I was building this character. Editing RJ chiming in here from the future. I double checked that spell because it felt a little too overpowered, and it turned out I was right. You get to choose one type of curse from that list of possibilities. You don't get to get all of them at once because that would be way too OP. Just wanted to call that out before everybody in the comment section decided to destroy me. But now back to the build. But now that we've covered all that, it's time for that multi-class. And remember, we're the Monarch of Shadow. So we're going to be multi-classing into Sorcerer. And when you become a Sorcerer, you get some more spellcasting, which we'll cover in just a second. But most importantly, you get a Sorceress Origin, which is basically a subclass. And they have a particular subclass already built out called the Shadow Shadow Sorcerer. When you become a sorcerer of shadow magic, you get the feature Eyes of Dark. This automatically gives you dark vision to 120 feet, but it actually upgrades in just a second as well. But I got so excited about becoming a shadow sorcerer, I can't forget about some of the basic spellcasting. We'll grab Shield just to improve your defensive capability, which allows you to use a reaction to increase your armor class by 5 until your next turn. We'll grab Magic Missile for the idea of summoning a bunch of daggers into existence and sending them at your enemies. And then, just because you're an OP main character, we'll grab Silvery Barbs just because it's Silvery Barbs. It's kind of an overpowered ability overall. It allows you to use a first level spell slot to force an enemy to have disadvantage while granting somebody else advantage, all with just one reaction. Then again, because you are the main character, you're hard to kill. So jumping back over to the shadow magic features, you also get Strength of the Grave. This feature just makes you incredibly hard to defeat. So when you get damaged and it reduces you to 0 hit points, you can make a charisma saving throw. The DC equals 5 plus the amount of damage that you took. On a success, you instead drop to 1 hit point. You only get to use this feature once per long rest, and it doesn't work if you're taken down by a critical hit or radiant damage, but it's still nice to have in your back pocket just in case. And if you use this ability properly, you can pull off one of the most badass moments in the anime.
No. I haven't lost yet!
God damn, isn't Alex Lee doing an absolutely stellar job with the English dub. I am so pumped about this. But back to the build. Then at second level of sorcerer, you get Font of Magic. So now you have a number of sorcery points equal to your level in sorcerer. You can use them for trading out spell slots for sorcery points or the other way around. And considering you're a warlock, you can do a coffee lock build here, where you can basically have a endless amount of spell slots just by taking short rests, because warlock spell slots recharge on a short rest while everybody else's recharges on a long rest. So now you can trade those out here and there and get a lot more spell casting per day. Wizards of the Coast did kind of try and phase this out, but that's not the main focus of this build. I just thought it was worth mentioning. But you can also use those sorcery points on meta magic, which you get at third level. Meta magic allows you to alter your spells in particular ways. You get to choose 2 meta magic options. So we're going to grab twin spells, so you can take a single target spell and target 2 creatures with it instead of just 1 by spending a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level. And the other meta magic option I'm going to grab is Quicken Spell. So a spell that would usually take an action to cast, now you can cast it as a bonus action just by spending some sorcery points. Also at third level, you get access to second level spells as a sorcerer, and one of the spells you get automatically by being a shadow magic sorcerer is thanks to your Eyes of Dark feature, because it upgrades at third level. It automatically grants you darkness, which is part of why we got rid of it from our warlock spell list, and you can actually spend 2 sorcery points to cast it. And if you do, you can see through that darkness, basically granting you that Devil's Sight Eldritch Invocation, but now you don't have to waste the invocation on it. You just gotta waste some sorcery points instead. But there are 3 second level spells I would grab from the sorcery spell list. One is Blur. It makes it so your enemies have disadvantage when attacking you. The second being Cloud of Daggers. We've already established you can summon a bunch of daggers simultaneously, so Cloud of Daggers just kind of makes sense. And the last one is Hold Person. Hold Person makes it so an enemy is paralyzed. And if an enemy is paralyzed, if you strike them with a melee attack, it automatically crits. And if you use your Eldritch Smite at the same time, that's a pretty powerful crit. Then at 4th level of Sorcerer, you get access to another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and max out that Charisma because it helps basically our entire build at this point. Then at 5th level of Sorcerer, you get access to 3rd level spell slots, and we're going to grab the spell Haste, because even in the webcomic, Sung Jin Woo has access to an ability called Quicksilver, which boosts up his speed dramatically. So Haste is the perfect way to pull that off. Then at 6th level of Sorcerer, you get another feature from your Shadow Magic subclass called Hound of Ill Omen. It allows you to summon forth a creature of howling darkness from the shadows. It has the same stats as a dire wolf, but it winds up being altered in a couple ways thanks to this ability. But you can spend 3 sorcery points to summon this shadowy creature. It gets boosted with a number of temporary hit points equal to half of your sorcerer level. It can move through creatures and objects, and it can track its enemies mercilessly. But it's just one more shadow summon to add to your list. Then instead of taking another level in Shadow Sorcerer, I want to go ahead and jump back over to Warlock. And at 7th level of Warlock, you get access to 4th level spells. So we can grab another Smite with Staggering Smite from being a Hexblade, but I want another good, powerful summon. So we're going to grab Spirit of Death. This allows you to summon a Reaper Spirit into existence. It can haunt creatures. It has incorporeal movement, so it can move like a shadow, and it attacks with a big scythe. It's just kind of everything you would want from a Warlock summon. But you also get one more Eldritch Invocation at this level. And just to make sure we get a little more summoning in there, we're going to grab Undying Servant. This allows you to cast Animate Dead once per day without spending a spell slot. It's the first actual spell that's not going to summon more of a like specter or shadowy type creature. It's actually going to be more of a zombie or ghoul, but it's still nice to have. Then at 8th level of Warlock, you get another ability score improvement. So let's go ahead and boost up that Constitution score because it helps our health and our concentration checks, which is going to be pretty helpful if you want to make sure you're maintaining all of those summons, because a lot of them are going to require concentration. Then at 9th level of Warlock, you get access to another Eldritch Invocation. And if we want to amp up the idea that your Eldritch Blast can be your daggers that you're sending out, let's go ahead and boost up the damage of those daggers by grabbing the invocation Agonizing Blast. So now you can add your charisma modifier to the damage of each blast coming out from your Eldritch Blast cantrip, which once you hit max level of this overall build, it's actually going to be 4 beams that shoot out. And you can send those out as a bonus action by quickening the spell thanks to your sorcerer metamagic options. Also at this 9th level, you get access to 5th level spells, and Sung Jin Woo is able to teleport into other people's shadows as long as he's teleporting through one of his summons. So that whole teleporting ability, we're going to go ahead and grab Far Step. I was going to grab Misty Step earlier, but I didn't want to bother mentioning that we would swap it out. But Far Step essentially allows you to cast Misty Step over and over again. We'll also grab another Smite with Banishing Smite from being a Hexblade. We'll also grab Hold Monster because it's more powerful than Hold Person because it can target more types of creatures. We can grab Enervation for dealing some necrotic damage, but at the same time you can heal your undead summons. And just to get more undead summons, we'll grab the spell Dance Macabre, allowing you to reanimate 5 corpses at once. And then there's other spells which I'll just leave on the character sheet. And then at 10th level of Warlock, you get another feature from your Hexblade subclass called Armor of Hexes. So now if somebody's cursed by your Hexblade's curse, you can actually just straight up dodge their attacks. If they hit you with an attack, you can roll a d6, and on a 4 or higher, you automatically dodge it, no matter what they roll, meaning that you have a 50% chance at dodging any attack coming at you. Then at 11th level of Warlock, you get access to a Mystic Arcanum, which is a special 6th level spell that you can cast once per day. So we're going to go ahead and grab Create Undead. This allows you to reanimate up to 3 ghouls around you, and they're under your control for 24 hours. Then at 12th level of Warlock, you get access to 1 more Eldritch Invocation and an ability score improvement. But as far as the Eldritch Invocation, we want to boost up those dagger attacks by grabbing the invocation Life Drinker. This allows us to add our charisma modifier to our attacks again. So now we have a plus 10 to the damage. And as far as the ability score improvement, we're going to take a feat. We're going to grab Metamagic Adept. And you might be wondering, why would you do that if you already have sorcery points to spend thanks to your levels in Sorcerer? Well, there's a reason. Metamagic Adept allows you to have 2 sorcery points, which adds to your overall pool of sorcery points. You get to choose 2 more metamagic options, so we're going to grab Heightened Spell, forcing your enemies to have disadvantage on any save against one of your spells, and Extended Spell, so any spell that you would cast that has some sort of duration, as long as it's 1 minute or longer, now gets doubled for up to 24 hours. But now we have a pool of 8 sorcery points, and that's pretty important because at 13th level you get access to another Mystic Arcanum, and this is a 7th level spell, and we want to make sure that you're increasing the amount of shadows or undead that are helping you out. So we're going to grab the spell Finger of Death. When you cast Finger of Death and it winds up slaying a creature, that creature immediately becomes a zombie under your control, and it becomes that zombie under your control permanently. And the reason I wanted to grab those extra sorcery points is because this is a 7th level spell and we didn't have 7 sorcery points. So if I wanted to twin cast this to get 2 zombies at the same time, Now I can do it. Then at 14th level of Warlock, you get one more feature from being a Hexblade, and it's called Master of Hexes. And now you can use your Hexblade's curse repeatedly. If you slay a creature that's under the effect of your Hexblade's curse, you can then move it to a different creature within range. The only downside is that you don't regain health if you wind up using it that way, but it's still pretty powerful because now you can deal that extra damage whenever you need to. That brings us to 20th level overall. I was very tempted to throw in one more multi-class with something like a Twilight Cleric, so that way you can give temp HP to all of the summons you have around you over and over again. But I thought it would be better to just go ahead and boost up the classes we already have to make it a bit more powerful rather than an overly spread multi-class, despite the fact that giving some temp HP might be like your Monarch's Domain ability. But let me know what you think about this build. If there's anything you do differently, I would love to know. This build was requested a ton of times, so I'm happy I finally got to do it, and hopefully I did the build justice. If you like D&D content or you like this build, make sure to subscribe and hit like, because overall that helps the channel, and apparently you roll more nat 20s if you happen to be subscribed to my channel. If you want access to the character sheets for this build or any of my other builds, feel free to check out my Patreon, linked in the description down below, where you can be just as awesome as some of these people scrolling on by, or the especially awesome player character patrons Felix Ulick, Dennis Bumgardner, Barrelisk, Crembro, Natron 209, Kevin Shirley, Zephyros, That Funny Man 57, Joshua Maynard, CGC 2014, Elisa Martinez, Panda Milkshake, Ted Z, Andrew Nobles, Carcat Kitsune, Decker Joint, Z13, Viral Nerevar, Daniel Galvin, and the Dino 21. Then going above and beyond that are my Dungeon Master level patrons I play D&D with. T. Brownie, Julia B. de Oliveira, Daniel Saffler, Command ZX, Cyberciety, Salvador, and Kilo Kilo. Then there's my ultimate patron, my God tier level patron. He really helps this channel to an insane degree, and that's GameSteak. So a very special thank you to him. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button. And I'll be here helping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to go full-blown solo leveling like Sung Jin Woo or Jinwoo Sung, depending on whether you're going with the Korean pronunciation or the American. Either way, I love this character. I love this webcomic. I'm so pumped about the anime because it seems to be doing it justice, at least so far. I'm hoping that that stays that way, but overall, I hope that you get the chance to play him in D&D.